Welcome, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is no stranger to the OPT Network, and every time I interview her, I say that. Her name is Amy Newmark. She is the editor-in-chief of Chicken Soup for the Soul, and she has been the editor-in-chief for 14 years now, 182 books. My goodness. This morning, we're talking about the latest release, Your 10 Keys to Happiness, 101 real-life stories that will show you how to improve your life. Amy, good morning and welcome back.
Oh, thanks for having me back. This is a real passion project, so I'm glad I get to come on and talk to you about it.
Indeed, 14 years, Amy, 182 books. Wow.
Yeah.
So talk about that milestone.
Yeah, it's a lot. And what I realized is that people come to me now asking for advice. It's like I'm an honorary psychologist or something, because I've read tens of thousands of Chicken Soup for the Soul stories. So it's like I read all these case studies, and it's really helped me to understand what works and what doesn't work for people, to help them find peace and contentment and joy in their lives. And I thought, it's time for me to just put all of this together in one volume. And so I made this book. I really sat down and thought about this analytically. And I thought, what are the 10 keys to happiness that have been unveiled to me by reading all these tens of thousands of stories? And that's what I put in this new collection.
Wow. And so after the pandemic and everything that the world went through, did that sort of have a bearing on how to find happiness again, or what that kind of looked and felt like?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all due for a fresh start right now. I mean, even though the pandemic is still around us,
Sure.
we all seem to have moved into a new phase. I know I'm kind of in that fresh start mode. And I think it's made us more aware that life is short, that we do deserve to be happy, and that we better avail ourselves of opportunities to be happy right now, right at this moment, because time is fleeting. And what I love about these 10 keys to happiness that I've identified is that you don't have to do all 10. You don't have to do 5. You could just do one of them, and it will make a big difference in your life. And what I've done with this book is I put in 101 stories that illustrate the 10 keys to happiness. You might just find one story that gives you one idea for something, some way you're going to tweak your life. And it will make a big difference. I know, because these stories have all worked for me.
Absolutely. And post-pandemic, and as you said, we're still experiencing COVID, certainly in very different ways. But I think a lot of people looked at happiness in a different way after, many people, I think everybody out of the million plus people that lost their lives to COVID, everybody sort of knew somebody, either personally or knew somebody who knew somebody that died. And it really made you understand how very short life is.
I think it has made us less patient about accepting the negative things in our lives. And normally patience is a virtue, but in this case, I think it's quite justified that you should be impatient about things that shouldn't be in your life anymore. And that might mean pruning the garden of your life. Keep the people who add value in your life, and prune those who don't. Make sure that you're pursuing a passion with at least part of your time each week. Prune your possessions so that you only keep the things that really make you happy, instead of having all those things that are like a psychic weight, to carry around with you. But I think that we all deserve to be happy now. And what's cool is that we all have the tools already inside ourselves to be happy. It's just that we need a little guidance for how to use them. And that's what I've tried to do with this new book.
So when you started contemplating the book, where did you begin to look? Did you look inward for the keys, or did you look inward in addition to all of the things that you have read and encountered over these 14 plus years?
I looked at what I've read in the tens of thousands of these personal, revealing Chicken Soup for the Soul stories that I've been privileged to read and edit. I looked at the stories, and then I looked at what worked for me and what worked for people who are close to me, because I've shared a lot of these techniques with people over the years. And that's how I put together the list of 10 keys to happiness. These are the 10 most important ways that you can get yourself in the path to happiness, in my opinion. And I use every single one of them myself. And I'll give you a good illustration of this. I have an incurable form of cancer, slow moving, but incurable. And I went to the psychiatrist that the doctor sent me to talk about this. And she said, so what are you here for? And I said, I don't know. I was sent here. So then she said, well, are you grateful for anything? And I spent 20 minutes talking about everything I was grateful for. And I realized that was because I've learned how to count my blessings because of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And then she said, do you have any unresolved issues with anyone? And I said, well, no. And I talked about using the power of forgiveness and how I don't carry with me the weight of past disappointments. And anyway, she went through kind of her checklist. And then she said, you don't need to come back. I have nothing that I can give you. You're done. And I said, I guess it's Chicken Soup for the Soul. I mean, basically, it's like a form of therapy. She said she didn't need to ever see me again. I was completely ready to go on with my life, with my new reality of cancer. Wow. Yeah. So I thought, wow, that is really a benefit of being editor-in-chief of Chicken Soup for the Soul. I really have developed all of these life skills that help me deal with even something as awful as cancer, and it certainly helps me deal with the driver who cut me off on the way to work this morning. Like, I don't care. I'm over that,
What's really striking about that is that was one of the main things that I looked at is free yourself with forgiveness. And sometimes we can read a lot of the things that, like you read, a lot of the stories, and even if whatever your faith is, most faiths talk about forgiveness, but it's quite another issue to really, really forgive. So how do you think you personally got there?
So it's really interesting. I used to think that the word forgiveness meant that you were basically saying, oh, that's okay. Don't worry about what you did to me. It's all right. But that's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness just means you've decided to stop reliving the negative emotions that went with whatever that thing was that was done to you. So we had a great story in the book that I think is such an eye-opener. It's by Lynn Sunday. And she had been divorced for years and was still telling people, even perfect strangers, about what her ex-husband did to her. And then her best friend said to her, Lynn, you might as well still be married to the guy. You take him with you wherever you go. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is the perfect way of thinking about what you do when you don't forgive. And Lynn said it was instantaneous for her. All of a sudden, she was like, oh yeah, my ex-husband, that was the past. I don't have to keep reliving those emotions. Yeah, that happened. I can intellectually know it happened, but I don't have to feel it over and over again. And after years of not moving forward after her divorce, all of a sudden she said she felt buoyant and she was free to move forward. She was liberated and she moved forward with her life from that point on. And that one story to me is life-changing.
Right. And Lynn's story, I think that so many of us feel somewhat validated because when we're telling our story, for me at least, it's about wanting to be right in the situation and feeling some sense of superiority about the decision that I made or didn't make and wanting others to validate how right we are about a situation. And so I think when you do that, it keeps you holding on to situations and things that just don't serve you any longer.
Yeah, and you're never going to get that other person to say that you were right. So you're just letting that person rent space in your head if you don't put the past in the past where it belongs. So I think that's one of the most important keys to happiness that I identified in this book. And the other really important one, which I know is a big part of your belief system, which is gratitude and counting your blessings and actively practicing gratitude so that you actually are aware of how good your life is.
And I think that especially in the economy that we're living in now, and one of the things that I said to you, before we started is, my mantra, I guess, sort of has become in all things, give thanks. And scripture tells us that not for all of the things like cancer, like in your situation, but even in those things, like being robbed or being wronged, in those things, still being able to find a sense of gratitude, a sense of, I'm going to be okay regardless to what has happened. And I think that, the grateful piece is something that we sort of forget.
I don't know how you can be happy if you're not actively practicing gratitude. And I started the book with a story by Jennifer Quasha, who said that she came from a long line of family members who were probably, clinically depressed. And she just thought that was how it needed to be. And she did go through some rough things in her life. But then when she had children, she realized, I don't want to be this way. So she had a little tiny date book that had just a little square for each day and just enough room to write one sentence. And so she just decided that each night she would write down one good thing that had happened to her that day. And it might have been, I was running late and then I found a parking spot right in front, or my husband came home from work early, whatever it was, she wrote it down. It had to be something different each day. Mm-hmm. And then she found that it was causing her to look at her days differently because she was looking for the item she was going to write down that night. And she said very quickly, that practice of just writing down one thing, and some people write down 3 things, but that practice turns you from a pessimist into an optimist very quickly. And I have read probably 1,000 stories from people who just wrote a list every day, 1 thing, 3 things, 5 things, whatever it was that worked for them. And they said it transformed them as people, because we're not all naturally grateful people. We don't, not all of us immediately are like, oh, this thing is happening, I wonder what the silver lining will be. I'm like that, but most people are not. And gratitude is one of the personality traits you can actually add on. There aren't that many things you can do to change your personality, but practicing gratitude actually does work. And you can make a permanent change in your personality and make counting your blessings just a regular part of your daily routine.
And, when I started reading about the gratitude piece, and of course it struck me, right where I was, I think that for me, in the second half of my life, raising small children again, and even raising our son, I've often thought that gratitude is, like you said, something that can be added. And I think that we're raising a generation with not a whole lot of gratitude. But gratitude has to be taught. And unless we start teaching our kids, because our kids are living in a space now of such entitlement, even people who don't have a lot find ways to give to their kids because they don't want their kids to feel less than or lacking, from their peers. And so we bend over backwards to make sure that our kids have everything that everybody else has. And if we're not careful and if we're not teaching gratitude, we're going to have a generation that's more and more entitled that really just doesn't have a great appreciation for what their parents do so that they can have, or what their parents go without so that they can have these things that seemingly make them feel fulfilled or make them feel, a part of the group or part of what their peers have. And so gratitude is something that very much has to be taught.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we've had stories from parents who actually instituted a gratitude practice with their children, or who have a Thanksgiving tradition where they go around the table saying what they're grateful for, or they do it every week, or they mandate that they do a kind deed every day and they discuss it at dinner at night. But there's a lot of strategies that parents can use to counteract whatever this crazy entitlement thing is that's going on. Because I agree with you. You see it, and you see it with younger people not necessarily wanting to start at the, ground level jobs. They want to, have you ever met a 22-year-old who said, I want to be an entrepreneur? I'm like, okay, that's not a thing. Like, go out and work somewhere and then come up with an idea for a business, and in 15 years be an entrepreneur. But you don't just say, I'm an entrepreneur now. Go and get a job. Right. Do something first.
Right. But I think the more we have these conversations and the more we express what that looks like, then hopefully it'll take hold. And I tell the young people, because we have, young people that work with us, that, if you're a good steward over where you are, and you learn to work and you learn the craft, then eventually the doors will open so that you can have your own. But like you said, you can't start at the top. It very much starts with stewardship.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that the lessons in this book are lessons that will help adults become happier people, but I really think these lessons can be shared with their family members as well. And there's nothing in here that wouldn't work for a preteen or a teenager as well.
Mm-hmm. And one of the big things that I really liked was number 7, stepping outside of your comfort zone. And, I think that so many people have had to pivot. We call it pivot after the pandemic. And to do a new thing, you had to step out of a place of comfort into really the unknown. Talk a little bit about that.
So this is one of the things that I never would have expected. If you had asked me 14 years ago to give you a list of 10 keys to happiness, I never would have thought to put this on the list. Stepping outside your comfort zone, though, turns out to be a really great key to happiness, because when you step outside your comfort zone and you do something new, especially something that's a little scary, you feel empowered and energized, and you feel invigorated. And it could be something as simple as, I did a crossword puzzle today and I've never done one before, for like a kid. Or it could be something as simple as, I went to a different grocery store, one where I didn't know where everything was. Or it could be something really major, like I switched careers, or I tried a new sport I'd never tried before. I have a story in the book about what I did, which was I went paragliding, which involved running off a cliff, 1,000-foot cliff in Oman, where you really have to go on faith, because behind you, lying at the top of the cliff, is a parachute, and it's lying on the ground. So behind you is a parachute lying on the ground with all those strings connected to the harness that's on you. And in front of you is the cliff. And they say it's really important you run off the cliff, because otherwise the parachute won't fill with air.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was scary. But I did it. And now when I have to do something scary, I always think, well, I ran off that cliff in Oman, so I can do this.
And what was that like once you took flight? And
I was still scared.
You were still scared.
I wasn't happy. No, you have your harnessed to like the guy, the guide or whatever. Uh-huh. So I'm harnessed to the guy, and he's like, "Oh, the winds are great today." And we almost hadn't been able to go because the winds were coming and going. Uh-huh. And I'm just thinking, we're like, the wind is going to all of a sudden stop and we're going to plummet to our deaths. But he said, the winds are great today. We're going to be able to stay up extra long. And I'm like, oh, that's really great. And he's like, do you want to take some pictures? I'm like, no, because if I don't hold on to this thing, we're going to die. So
what made you do it, Amy? Was it just a bucket list, or was it conquering a fear? Or
I was turning 60. I was 59 and I was turning 60 the next year. And I was just like, I have to keep doing new things. And I had read on TripAdvisor that the really cool guests paraglided down into this resort on the Persian Gulf.
The really cool guests.
The really cool guests. And if you weren't cool, then you like got driven down this road or took a speedboat to the place. And so I wanted to be one of the cool guests because I was feeling that, 60th birthday coming along. So I was a really wimpy, scared, cool guest, I guess. And I mean, I was so happy when 15 minutes later you land by ground. Running, like you run onto the beach. Yeah, I was so happy. And I think it was 10 in the morning, but I said I need a drink.
So, Amy,
I'm not even a drinker.
I can only imagine. Are there any of the keys that you think are more important than any others?
So I really think that gratitude and forgiveness are super important. I also some of these might seem minor, but they really are life-changing, and you can do them pretty quickly. For example, one of the keys to happiness that I came up with is that you need to have less stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, stuff is just such a weight on you, right? When you go home and your closet is filled with things you don't use anymore, your drawers in the kitchen are filled with things you don't really use. There's just so much extra stuff that we have in our lives, and we're holding on to it because we think our kids might want it one day. No, they are never going to take it because they want new stuff. They don't want your china, your crystal, your used toaster, because they're like, Mom, I can buy a new one for $25. I'm going to get a new one. So having less stuff is something I've been really trying hard to do. And my husband and I have given away so much of our stuff. And there was a story from John Buentello in the book. He and his wife were moving from a house to an apartment, and they had earmarked all kinds of stuff that was going to go into storage. And right when they were about to move it all to storage and pay all that money, for monthly storage fees, he said to his wife, what if we just give it all away? And they did it. And he never, ever missed any of it. He felt so liberated from his stuff when he moved into his new apartment with, a third of the stuff that he used to have. So that's one that I think people can implement right away. And it really makes a big difference, even if you just do one project a week, one drawer, one closet shelf, right? One kitchen cabinet, the back of your car, whatever it is. Getting rid of stuff is really empowering, and it just makes you feel so much better about yourself. Another thing that I think is important is that we need to be a little bit selfish. And I talked about how COVID, has made people realize, hey, I do deserve to be happy, and life is short and bad things happen, and I should enjoy life while I'm here. Well, making me time is super important. And it's not selfish to say, I'm going to carve out 30 minutes a day for myself, or 60 minutes a day, or 3 hours a week, but something that you can anchor yourself to and know, hey, every night after the kids are in bed, I get to read a book for 30 minutes. And that's my special time, and I deserve that. So I have a lot of examples in there of people who have done that. One woman wrote a great story about something called lily pads. She had a mentor at her job who said to her, you have to build lily pads into your schedule, because it was one of those workplaces where they had a shared calendar. And so people kept putting appointments on this woman's calendar. And then her mentor said, put fake appointments on your calendar every day, one a day. That's your lily pad. You know how the frog jumps out of the water and basks in the sun, and the lily pad takes a little rest? Put those lily pads onto your calendar so that you preserve a little bit of time for yourself every day. And I thought, what a fabulous idea. We all need that. And sometimes now on our work from home days, because we're hybrid, sometimes at the office, sometimes at home, on my work from home day, I'll just look at my calendar in the middle of the day and I'll be like, I've got nothing for the next hour, and I'll run outside and ride my bike for 45 minutes. And it's like a stolen bit of me time, but it's really important.
And I wonder about that, because I too have been trying to carve out time for myself, but how you do it without feeling guilty, how you do it without feeling like I really should be doing work.
You have to just say that it's not selfish, and you need it in order to be better at whatever you do. You will be a better parent, a better spouse, a better friend, a better co-volunteer, a better co-worker. If you have taken that little mental health break each day or each week, it could just be that you do something every Saturday morning that's just for you. I have another story in the book from a woman who has a horse, and part of having a horse, of course, is paying for boarding. And so she pays for boarding by doing stable work. So every Saturday she goes to the stable. She spends a few hours doing her work to pay for boarding her horse. And then once she's done her work, mucking out stalls, etc., she gets a couple of hours to ride her horse. And her whole family knows that Saturdays until 2 p.m. are sacred for her, that she will do that every single Saturday. If there's a family birthday party, any event whatsoever, it cannot start until 2 o'clock on Saturday.
I love it. So it's another great book. And I think the timing, especially everything that's going on in our world with mass shootings, with the polarization of America, I think that if we start to search within for what we can do to be better humans, to be happier, hopefully it'll make the world a better, more productive place. Before we've got to let you go, Amy, tell people how they can pick up on this new release of Chicken Soup for the Soul, your 10 keys to happiness, 101 real life stories that will show you how to improve your life.
You can find the book at Walmart, at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Amazon, wherever you like to get books. We like to support independent bookstores as well. And you can go on our website and you'll see the book there. And if you click on it, there's a way to buy it at an independent bookstore as well.
Absolutely. This book really makes us contemplate happiness, what it means, and more importantly, what it takes to live a life that's filled with happiness. Now, we know that every day is not going to be a happy day, but by using these principles, it's certainly going to help us to be closer to being happy and joyous.
This is something that you can control in your life, and it's nice to have control over something these days.
Indeed. Amy, it's always a great pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Indeed. Chicken Soup for the Soul, your 10 keys to happiness. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for spending maybe the very first part of your morning with us right here on the Carlette Christmas Show. The reason why we do it every single morning is simple. We love you, and we know that God loves us all even more than that. Don't forget, love yourself and love somebody else. And please enter to win our $100 free gas card giveaways. All you've got to do is go to social media, type your name in and your phone number, and you are registered to win. Or if you listen to us on radio Monday through Friday from 7 to 9 a.m. on KAYT FM 88.1, you could win a $100 free gas card giveaway. It's another way that we are partnering with community businesses to be agents of change. We'd like to thank Christus St. Francis Cabrini Hospital, Why Not Stop and San Romain Oil, Global Trucking Academy, and Dr. Keith A. Fox for joining us in helping you to fill up at the pump. Stay safe and well. God willing, we'll see you right back here next time.